Hey guys, thanks as always for tuning in. Jay Helmsing here. Today I'm going to cover a gun that I'm really excited to be sharing with you guys. It's going to be the Sig P320 X-Carry. This has been on the most wanted list of mine for quite a while. I've been waiting to get this and I just got it in a couple days ago. So I'm going to kind of go over this in detail with you guys. I'm also going to compare it to the P320 Compact, just the standard version here. This one does not have the drop upgrade, just for the record there, but kind of look at the pros and cons of each and kind of see why you should or should not get the 320 X-Carry as opposed to the 320 Compact or 320 Carry. So just kind of a little bit of background. These were a big hit at the SHOT Show last year, and they had a release date just a few months after the SHOT Show. However, they kept getting backed up, and obviously with the drop issues with Sig in regards to the 320, the lines producing these pretty much just stopped. So as of late, they've been opened back up. They're releasing them again. And this model does have the drop fix upgrade in it. A couple ways you can tell. Obviously on the standard guns, they have a much more thin trigger. With the flat trigger in here, you can tell looking really closely at the trigger, it's much more thin. So the area inside here, the mass has been taken out, just thinned down and probably lightened out a little bit. But the easiest way to tell is obviously when it goes into battery, you pull the trigger, you get that click. Afterwards, there's no sound with the drop updated one, so it doesn't make any sound as you pull it to the back and you have a dead trigger, whereas the old ones with the non-drop fix, they're going to make that click that you hear there even on a dead trigger. So kind of one telltale sign if you get a hold of one of these, you're not sure if it's got the drop upgrade or not. That's kind of the way to do it. Now in regards to the 320 X-Carry, this is basically a scaled down version of the P320 X5, which was a big hit, but it was more geared toward maybe a target or a competition sort of gun. So it obviously had the full size slide, had adjustable fiber optic sights on it, had a replaceable plate that you could use for the Romeo 1 if so desired. It also had the full size grip. This one's been obviously cut down, but same style grip as this. But again, the X-Carry is just kind of marketed to be more of a everyday functional design of the X5 320. But kind of the reason I got it is obviously just to carry around and use it, and just kind of provide just a little bit of an upgrade to the regular 320 that I typically carry. So that's what I'm going to be. That's a thrust. That's what I'm going to be looking at pretty closely. Is what advantages does this give me over the regular 320 or the 320 Carry? So start out top to bottom as usual. These, instead of having fiber optic sights on the X-Carry, they have the Sig X-Ray 3 sights, which I'm a pretty big fan of. However, the rear sight is built into this plate here, and this plate is obviously for the optic mount. And you can tell it's a different color. It's more of just a plain black, whereas you kind of got the gray tone of the slide here. So it's definitely not the same coating that the slide has there. But again, the rear sight is built right into this plate. So the rear sight, as far as I'm concerned, is not adjustable at all. There's no dovetail in there. There's no way you can move this side to side. Now the front, being a standard Sig 320 style sight, is obviously going to be drift adjustable. So there is a little bit of adjustment if needed, but you're going to have to use that front sight. Not probably a big deal for me because I've never had to adjust a Sig Sauer as far as point of aim, point of impact. It seems like if they're lined up perfectly center, I'm going to hit exactly where those sights are pointed. So your mileage may vary, but that's just what I found with them. So not a big point of contention for me there. These are tritium in the rear. They're more blacked out than the front here. I also put a little bit of black marker over the top of them. I typically do that with all of my rear sights. There's a small chrome ring around the tritium vials in this. It just kind of stands out a little bit. It's not white paint or anything, but it does stand out a little bit more than your typical X-Ray 3 sights. And also, if you notice back here, this has kind of a recess. However, there is no serration or anything on the back like you'd have with typical X-Ray 3 sights. So just something to be aware of there. They're not genuine organic X3 sights as you might be expecting. They're more proprietary to this gun. So moving down to the slide, this is a compact size slide. Probably the most notable feature is going to be the lightning cut here. It's not ported or anything, it's just a lightning cut. So mostly probably for aesthetic purposes, but I'm sure it lightens it just a little bit as well. The serrations are just like on the X5, so they're a little bit more vertical, more up and down, and they're obviously wider and further apart, and they do seem to function a little bit better than the ones on the standard 320, as you guys can see side by side. A little bit fatter as far as the actual metal that's left there on the regular 320, and also slanted and canted a little bit more forward. So just a noticeable difference there. Now the barrel in this was obviously something I was very interested in. It is not a standard barrel. So if you look at the end of it, it has the X5 style crown on it, which is more like a recessed crown. But it is not the big thick barrel like you get in the X5. The X5's got that big like 40 caliber diameter barrel that's been, you know, obviously modified to shoot 9mm, so it's a big thick bull barrel. This is not that same thick barrel. This is the exact same size as your regular 9mm barrel. It's just probably more of what you call a match grade barrel, which is, you know, a pretty nebulous term. But it seems to have a little bit more pronounced ring lands in there, maybe a little bit thicker. I can't verify that obviously, but the biggest difference that I noticed is the crown here at the end of the muzzle. So there is a difference between this and the standard 320 barrel. Now the really interesting thing is it definitely has a more solid lockup than the regular P320. So just to kind of demonstrate that, in full battery here, there is just zero movement. As I push on either the slide itself or the barrel, there's just no movement, just a really solid lockup. So obviously very good for accuracy. Your standard P320, we can induce a little bit of movement, mostly toward this front end as we kind of do that same test there. So obviously lock up a little bit better in this X-Carry, and that's what you want for accuracy purposes. So I expect this to be a little bit more accurate than you're going to get out of your regular P320, which is kind of the point of this gun. Most noticeable difference probably in the gun overall is going to be this grip frame. Now, as I mentioned, this is basically the same you know, handle or grip that you're going to have on the 320 X5. However, it's just been kind of notched down in the front here to fit the compact size slide, because like I say, this is marketed more as a carry gun. Now with that in mind, I have noticed the end here seems to be a little bit, I won't say unfinished, but it's just not quite as melted as I would expect. So you look at your regular 320s, and at the end there's a very nice bevel, and it looks like it's just kind of cast in there in a very certain way. This almost looks like a chopped down X5 grip at this point. So if you look at it, I wouldn't say there's saw marks or anything, but definitely no casting marks up there, so it's definitely hit a grinder at some point. But these may be just chopped down versions of the full-size you know, X5 grip there. I'm not really sure, but just something to note. They are much more sharp on the end there for, you know, reholstering purposes and whatnot. Just something to kind of be aware of. But something I noticed while handling the gun. Now again, talking about the grip, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs. It's much more of a slab-sided style grip. You don't have this rounded rear grip here, which I'm not a big fan of the kind of rounded grip that they use on this the standard 320s. But just like the regular X5, flat on the sides, texture goes all the way up here, and it also kind of pushes out, pushes your hand away from the slide stops or slide releases. And these are obviously the Gen 2 style, the more small style. But as I get a grip on this, which I can really get a vice-like grip the way this grip is made, it does keep my palm pushed out pretty good ways away from the slide release there. So as far as riding that or anything, I don't think you'll have any problems with this style grip, the way it's designed with that purpose in mind. The beaver tail is a little bit longer and it's a little bit more pronounced. It is, however, more narrow at the end, so it just kind of points down a little bit, as you'll notice comparing that to the regular 320, just kind of a little bit extended there. Also, something I've noticed is the contour of it. It kind of comes out to this 90 degree and even comes down a little bit, so it's really easy to get a lot of leverage on as you bring your hand up into it. The standard 320 is just kind of a little ducktail that just kind of rounds up there, and you don't get as much leverage on it. So pretty neat feeling grip in your hand, and I'm a real big fan of this undercut here. If you notice the undercut underneath the trigger guard there, the X5, you know, trademark undercut that really gives you a lot of control up in there. So pretty nice feeling grip. Probably my most favorite feature of this grip is the fact that this back strap here, the way it contours down, it kind of comes to more of a flare at the end. Now, this is obviously not flared like you're going to get out of like a Gen 5 Glock or something like that, but it does kind of flare down at the end. And to me, That's a real nice feeling grip, very controllable. As opposed to the regular 320, you kind of have this hump and then it cants back in here, so it kind of rounds down at the end. That, to me, I just kind of feel like I'm holding like a broom handle or something, and I don't have nearly as much control of the gun as I would with something like this. So most notable for me is this back strap really lets me plant it in my hand and get a really nice firm grip. So definitely something worth experiencing and at least holding in the gun store if you can. Moving on with this is just a standard mag release here on the opposite side. There's nothing, it's not extended or anything like that, although they do stick out quite a ways. However, that's pretty standard on all 320s, so they're out there quite a ways, just like they are in anything else, so nothing extended there. Now the flat trigger, like I said, this one has been lightened. It's just much more thin than the original versions with the non-drop fixed ones. So it's very thin both front and on the sides there. However, it's still the flat trigger, so kind of nice to see that Sig came up with a fix in order to retain the flat trigger instead of putting that curved trigger in everything. So kudos to them there. We'll go next and take a look at the mag well, because this is really an impressive feature here. If I can get some light down in there for you. It's basically pushed out just as far as it can go, and like I say, it's not flared, it's very flat on the sides for carrying. However, it's just got this nice taper that runs probably almost a 1/4 inch down on both sides, even the back and the front there. So it's beveled all the way around, and it's probably the largest built-in mag well that I've ever seen. So it's just absolutely seamless as far as running these mags up in it. So also a very nice feature, and it should help with obviously reloads, this being a kind of competition-oriented gun or competition-inspired gun based off of the X5. The next thing I'll point out is the magazine itself. And I was kind of curious if the regular the X-Carry would use the regular full-size P320 magazines, and the answer is no. So the magazine itself, the metal part here, is the exact same. It's 17 rounds, just as you're going to get in a full size or a carry size P320. However, right down here on the base plate, this is different. So I'll grab one here to show you guys. But this is going to be a your standard size, full size P320 magazine here. The plates are different on the bottom. We got a slightly different style notch here to release it. So this being the traditional one here, this being the one that's on the X-Carry, and obviously a different logo there to kind of be able to tell them apart. The only real functional difference is going to be right here, where it still looks like it has those notches. However, they're very tapered, and they taper into the gun or into the magazine itself. And they do that so they can feed into the mag well. This here with these notches that kind of go into the grip of the standard size one, these won't fit, and I'll kind of demonstrate that for you. So standard magazine is going to get caught right on those notches there. It's not going to feed all the way up into it. So it's something to be aware of, that the X-Carry does take proprietary magazines at this point, at least proprietary base plates. So I believe you could be able to change your normal full-size P320 magazines into the X-Carry style if you could get the whole that base plate, or if you were so inclined to take this to a belt sander or something and kind of narrow down these notches so that it would fit up in that mag well. That's also a possible fix for that if you have a ton of these full-size magazines laying around like I do. Other than that, we'll get into the trigger last. The first thing I want to point out before we get into that is the lockup is so tight in this gun that if you don't right it from all the way back from where the slide stop catches it and let it go forward, it's not going to go fully into battery. It doesn't mean it's broken, so don't get kind of weirded out by that, but I've noticed that on the X5 as well. If you just kind of right it, like this, it's going to be in this half in, half out of battery position here, and you're going to have to push it all the way into battery. Mine did it pretty bad out of the box. However, now it's getting a little bit more broken in, and it's a little bit easier to make sure that it goes into battery. But if you just kind of half cock it, or if you're just used to dry firing like that, it's not going to go fully into battery because it is such a tight lockup with this gun. So like I say, something to note there. The trigger itself is basically identical to any other 320. It's not lighter. There's nothing in this fire control unit that's different. So basically there's no real slack or take up. I mean, maybe a millimeter or two there, and then you're back to some form of a wall. Now on this 320, what it's going to do is carry through the wall just a hair, and then it's going to kind of break there. So not a whole lot of trigger movement overall. Reset, just like your regular 320, And again, right back in, right off that wall, you're gonna have a little bit of play and it's gonna fire again. So the flat trigger does give you a little bit more of a mechanical advantage, so it does feel easier, but the overall functionality and feel of the gun is no different than you're gonna get from any other 320. So, you know, obviously probably good for legality reasons, because it's essentially a fire control unit from a regular 320, nothing different there. And they just kind of built the bonuses, the add-ons, the benefits around that trigger unit itself. I will say these ones that have been drop modified do feel a little bit more crisp, especially on the reset. So just for comparison's sake, regular 320 compact, take up, maybe a little more take up than on that X5 or the X-Carry, but it's just junky. It's not as nice feeling as it is on the X-Carry with that drop upgrade. And again, hit that wall, sweep through just a little bit. We're gonna have that break there, and then reset does not feel or sound quite as positive as it does on the drop fixed guns, and I've noticed that with the regular drop fixed 320s as well. So I don't attribute that to being an X-Carry, but more just kind of a feature of the drop upgrade that's been done. So some things to think about, right? So next we're going to get into holsters, because obviously at this point, you know, I went right away looking for extra mags for this, and I can't find any even on the SIG website yet. So still waiting on some extra mags when those release, or extra base plates, so I can make my own. Or I might get into modifying my own if I want to shoot this in competition, but that's for another discussion, right? So I tried my regular 320 holsters, these Kydex holsters. It's made for a 320 compact. Obviously, that's what you want with a compact slide. First one I tried, it did fit. However, if you notice, there's not like a positive engagement there. And the thing I attribute that to is this trigger guard here. Just the way it's contoured, it's a little bit more thin and a little bit more rounded. It's not any thinner width-wise, it's just more rounded and, like I say, a little bit more thin this way, okay? So it will fit in pretty much any compact holster. However, it's not gonna be the most positive engaging. And I'm sure there are people out there that are working on you know, X5 specific models, but until then, you can get by using one of those. This holster is a different style. Also a Kydex holster that I had custom made for my 320 compact. Very positive engagement when I first got it, and this one seems to work a lot better as far as being an actual usable holster for this gun here. So as you can hear, very positive engagement. I did wrench down the adjustment a little bit more, but holds it in there very nicely, almost like it's made for it. So depending on the holster, you can basically have one, you know, made for it. Biggest thing you got to watch for is that the trigger is completely covered there by that hard Kydex, and then you got a nice secure lock in there, and you know, you can adjust that on most of these holsters. So something to note, your regular 320 compact or 320 carry Kydex holsters should work just fine. So I wanted to point that out and get that out there in the open as well. Well, that's pretty much it. That's going to cover the initial review of the X-Carry. I'm going to get into obviously some shooting with this gun and test it out. Only other thing worth mentioning is that unboxing this gun, there's no holster in there. There's none of the kind of fanfare that you would get from you know, some of the other P320 series guns. So that little outside the waistband 2-cent holster they used to include, that was not included in this one. You do get 3 magazines though, so you know, something to be aware of. And also, I don't know if it's just me, but every SIG that I've gotten in the last 2 years is like bathed in oil, and this was no different. When I took it out, I mean, it was just dripping with oil. It's like they dunk it in oil before they send it to you. And it was just kind of not really even presentable. It was wrapped in that bag, and it had some lithium grease on the grip itself. It was just kind of a mess. So I really had to do some scrubbing and clean this up and make it presentable. So again, I think SIG is pretty far backed up at this point. I think they're just getting everything out the door they can. But you know, something else to note, something else to watch for, some guns ship dry. This definitely does not ship dry, at least the one I got. You're gonna have to spend some time cleaning it up before you take it to the range. So again, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the update and the shooting impressions video, because that's going to be forthcoming. And I appreciate the likes, the subscribes. Check out my channel The rest of my videos on my channel, also feel free to check out my Instagram account. I show some shooting footage and whatnot in there as well. Same username as I have here. Keep up the likes, the subscribes, the love. Share these videos, and I'll keep coming at you guys. I really appreciate it. Take care.